In today's video, we have another player on NHL Waivers, this time for the purpose of contract termination. We also want to take a look at some Montreal Canadiens trade rumors. Is Marc Bergevin done after the coaching change, or will there be additional moves? Plus, speaking of coaches, who else is on the hot seat and might be in risk of losing their job? We'll discuss the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to talk about. Start off here with the NHL waiver wire news. Today we found out that the Ottawa Senators have placed forward Philip Schlappick on NHL waivers for the purpose of contract termination. This is something they've mutually agreed to, and it looks as though Schlappick will be heading back to Europe to finish out the season. Obviously, no real certainty on what his NHL future might hold, but thus he'll become an unrestricted free agent and could theoretically sign with any NHL team. He was a 2015 second-round pick of the Ottawa Senators, has been in their system for some time, had a pretty solid junior career. He played over in the QMJHL, put up some good numbers, had some good solid AHL seasons as well. At this point, has had limited opportunity in the NHL, and really the Senators prospects, especially in the forward group, are getting pretty deep, and it's getting pretty hard for him to get an opportunity, especially with the number of veterans that Ottawa brought in as kind of like placeholders for this coming season. It looks as though he kind of got boxed out, found himself either between the taxi squad or in the American Hockey League, and I think at this point he's just growing a little frustrated with his lack of opportunity and has decided to pack it up and head home to Europe and see where the future might take him from there. So hard to say. I mean, I'm not sure that Schlappick would ever be more than a bottom six forward in the NHL, but still, he could be a good depth piece, and I wouldn't be completely shocked if he does get another NHL opportunity with another club here, whether it be next year or after playing in Europe for a little while longer to kind of, gain some more attention to his game and see where things bring him. Now, as we saw yesterday, some big news out of Montreal with Claude Julien being let go as head coach of the Montreal Canadiens, along with assistant coach Kirk Muller. And of course, immediately after, there's a lot of people talking, saying, who else might be on the hot seat? What other head coaches are at most risk to possibly be losing their jobs? I know there's certain websites, like betting websites, that have odds out there. You can actually place bets on this, and it looks as though the consensus, from what I could tell at different betting sites, is that Vancouver Canucks head coach Travis Green is probably the most at risk here to have that happen to him, to possibly be the next guy. Now, I know there's probably some Calgary fans out there that might disagree with that have been frustrated with Jeff Ward. I know there's some people talking about John Hines in Nashville. Obviously, the Predators have greatly disappointed. I'm not so sure about Hines, though. He hasn't been there too terribly long. I know he is regarded as a good coach, but most of these guys are good coaches. And at the end of the day here, they've acknowledged that their roster has let them down. I'm not sure that Hines will be in jeopardy there. I guess we'll have to remain to be seen. It wouldn't be a complete shocker if he was, but at the same time, I could see where they might not do that and try to make a bunch of trades and see where things go maybe next year. But I certainly think Green and Ward in Western Canada are both at risk. I know DJ Smith's name has come up as well, seeing as Ottawa is still lower in the standings, but I really don't see that being an issue right now for them. DJ Smith has done a decent job. I can see how some people were a little bit frustrated with his usage of veterans versus young players early in the season, but that's just a matter of him kind of forcing the young players to earn their spots. And at this point, Ottawa, even though they came out and said they thought they could be a playoff team this year, I know personally, myself as a Sens fan, did not necessarily see that being the case. I knew they would be either at or near the bottom of this really tough Canadian North Division, so I don't think that there's any danger of DJ Smith losing his job here for a while. That's something that I can see them giving him more time to work this rebuild before they go down that road. But if you look around the NHL, I mean, I'm just not sure we're going to see a whole lot of coaching changes this year. Before Julien was fired, I know I myself wondered if we might not see any until after the season was over, just due to the pandemic and COVID and everything. And obviously owners are not going to want to be paying people to not work for them, right? So anyways, we'll see. So let me know down below in the comments which coaches you feel are facing the most pressure, who's on the hot seat here kind of the most and really needs to get this team going to get themselves a little bit more job security. Are we looking at Travis Green? Are we looking at Jeff Ward or John Hines or anybody else. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Now, as I mentioned as well, I wanted to kind of segue that into Montreal. Now, there's a lot of people with a lot of different opinions on where the Habs are at. I know they had a tremendous start to the season. A lot of media were saying they were going to be a juggernaut. I know that was a term thrown around quite a bit. I know I was a little reluctant to go that far with things. I mean, leading into the season, I had high hopes for Montreal. I personally said I thought they would have improved a lot. Like on paper, they look substantially better. I thought they would definitely be a playoff team and most likely be in the top 3 teams in the North Division. I really thought teams like Toronto or Edmonton would be just a little bit too offensive for them to keep up with for a little while here, and that they'd probably be in the, either number 3, number 4 spot, but certainly make the playoffs and at least give teams a good run and make some good progress. That's where I kind of pegged Montreal to be heading into the season. But obviously with the start they had, the expectations kind of went off the rails here a little bit. I think Marc Bergevin had high expectations as well, given the fact that the Montreal Canadiens spent more money in the offseason than any other NHL team. The contracts they handed out in free agency and extensions were over $100 million. So when you spend that kind of money, especially when revenues are down an extreme amount, you're in a pandemic, there's no fans in the building, there's extreme pressure to deliver results if you're going to be doing that kind of activity. I mean, many had criticized Bergevin for a long time of not spending to the cap. Now he does. So yes, when you do that, the pressure and the expectations go up exponentially. Now, listening to a variety of NHL insiders as well as different radio stations around, different Canadian markets, especially in Montreal this morning, there seems to be a lot of people that think that Marc Bergevin is not going to be done here, that they have identified some key areas of their team, obviously this, and especially in this last stretch of, say, 8 to 10 games, where they think they need to make some upgrades if they really want to have a shot at making the playoffs. I know many people feel Bergevin, for himself and his own job, needed to not only make the playoffs, but do some damage in the playoffs and win a round or two to really kind of take the pressure off and show ownership that we're heading in the right direction here. All these moves are paying off, and we're heading towards being a Stanley Cup contender. So clearly that's everybody's goal. Now, the main thing that's been identified through, which I do tend to agree with to an extent here, is that they're not deep enough down the middle with experience. Now, they have some good centers, don't get me wrong. I think a lot of people, myself included, are very pleased with the progress of Nick Suzuki. I think he's got a very bright future. We saw him off to a torrid pace to start the season. He's becoming a really solid two-way player as well, which is great. But he's still really young and still certainly has a lot of room to continue to get better. And obviously, it's hard on the young players when you're facing that much pressure. You get Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who seems to be having a hard time figuring out what kind of player he's going to be. I'm not really sure that right now we can see him long-term being more than a number 3 center, but still, he's not the most consistent with his game. Good young player, though, a good piece for them. But still, you don't want him facing too many tough matchups, obviously, because he could end up being exposed. And then you have a guy like Phillip Danault, who has experience, has a guy who's been in the Selke conversation the last few years, has not scored a goal this season. And in my opinion, and I've seen a lot of Habs games this year, I've seen most of them, that I don't think he's been as good defensively as well. I mean, there was a lot of reports that he turned down a big contract extension this offseason, worth around $25 to $30 million. So that kind of boggles my mind why he thought he'd be worth that much more than that. Long term, if Suzuki and Kotkaniemi do continue to develop, he likely would be the number 3 center on this team, but he's had to take a little bit more of a role here because of the fact that they're so young and sometimes they can't always handle those top 6 minutes. Suzuki's been a little bit better than Kotkaniemi, though, in handling all that, in my opinion. Now, but Danault, I just don't see him having a great season. In my opinion, he has not been great. Like I said, watching a lot of plays, just the back checking, the face-offs, the whole package for me, he's taken a big step back this year. And on a contract year is just not... It's not a good thing for him when it comes to getting his next payday, for sure. And you have to question whether Bergevin would make a move in that regard. I mean, we've already had other conversations before, but maybe Eric Stahl's a guy that they need to take a look at. Obviously, we have a new coach coming into. We have to see how he feels about this lineup. It looks as though tonight, for the first game under Ducharme, that Jake Evans is going to be a healthy scratch. He's been a pretty decent fourth-line center, in my opinion. He said it really wasn't anything to do with the fact that he didn't like him or his game or anything, but he's putting Paul Byron at center. So I think we can probably say that he agrees that they need more experience down the middle. But at the same time, maybe a guy like Kotkaniemi could later move to the wing if they were to bring in another experienced pivot here who could play that middle six role, number 2, number 3, or even be a number 1 if had to be. I mean, Stahl's a guy that comes to mind. I know there were some people talking about Jack Eichel. I don't see that happening. That's way too much money. And I don't see an Eichel trade happening if it did out of Buffalo until at least the offseason. And that's if it happens. There's no guarantee that it will. So in Montreal's case, it might make a lot of sense for them to go after, whether it be Eric Stahl or a comparable type player as a rental to give themselves some more experience, to give themselves a guy who's got some playoff experience for starters, can be good on the draw, not only good offensively, but good in his own end too, like a good solid two-way center iceman if they can. And you know what? Maybe they consider trading Philip Deneau as part of that package. It's hard to say. I mean, after the way he's played in the contract, it's hard to justify. So we will see what Montreal does, but I know that seems to be the general consensus. I've heard a lot of people saying, too, that they could use some more help on the blue line. I'm not so sure that the blue line's been a big issue for me. Obviously, they have a lot of guys who can certainly play that are on NHL contracts, but I could see a scenario unfolding where maybe they do bring in some more added depth. I mean, everybody needs lots of depth for the playoffs. I mean, they do have some guys that, are not always playing because there's not enough room, like a Victor Mente, for example, another younger player, but still somebody who can skate and move the puck well, which is what they were saying that they could probably use a little bit more of. So maybe we see some, alternate lineup changes here by Ducharme as well to kind of rejig that back end a little bit. One thing that everybody seems to agree on is this team is not going to go super far and be super successful without a successful Carrie Price. Now, I took a little bit of flack in the other video I did talking about the fact that Price has been inconsistent, but say what you want. I mean, I'm not saying he's done. I'm not saying he's a rotten goalie. He's a great goalie, but if you can't see the fact that Carrie Price has been an inconsistent guy this year, letting in soft goals at bad moments, then I don't know what else to tell you here, but he has not been at his elite level. Like when we saw him winning all those trophies back, like 4 years ago or whatever that was, he was an elite goaltender that you could not, he was the reason they were winning games. Many people said for a long time that they'll only go as far as Carrie Price will take them. And even though that's a little bit less true today than it was a few years back, it's still super important. I mean, I know there was a lot of people talking on the radio and different programs analyzing the Julian firing situations. Like, you know what? You look at many coaches that get fired, check the goalie's save percentage. Oftentimes it's quite low. The goalie can really cover up a lot of flaws in your team when things are not going well, but they're playing at a high level. And it can go the other way as well, that it gets exposed when the goalie's not there to bail them out. So at the end of the day, Jake Allen's been a great fill-in for him. He's given him the rest he's needed. But is he getting too much rest? Like, what is it? Carey Price needs to find his game if Montreal is going to get things turned around. I don't care what other moves Bergevin makes. Price needs to get going. That it's safe to say that he's not going anywhere. He's going to finish his career as a Hab. He is a great goaltender. Certainly one of the better ones of his generation. Well-accomplished goalie. I have a lot of respect for Carey Price. He's a terrific person as well. But he needs to be more consistent. That's just the end of the story here. And if he had a more consistent season, and there's, say, 3 or 4 of those games that they lost that they should have won because of soft goals being let in, maybe Claude Julien still has a job, and maybe we're having an entirely different conversation. So let me know what you think. What moves does Marc Bergevin need to make, if any, to make this roster better, to make sure that they do live up to the expectations and they don't succumb to the pressure here? They make the playoffs and have a chance to make some noise. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.